Hello, welcome to another episode of Upstate Archives. My name is Christina. I'm a digital producer here at News 10, and each week I sit down with local experts to dig into the history of the Capital Region. This week I am joined by Brian Bouye of the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame in Saratoga Springs. He is the Hall of Fame and Communications Director. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. So this week we are going to be jumping into the history of horse racing in Saratoga Springs. It's a big, if you live here, you know about horse racing. It's quite an industry. But we had talked about this when we were setting up this interview, that this is going to be sort of more of an introductory sort of episode into horse racing because there's just so much to go into it. I'm sure we'll have plenty of episodes in the future on this. But just to sort of jump into the conversation, just tell me a little bit about what early horse racing was like in the U.S., just in general, and just give us a little bit of an introduction into the sport.
Sure. So racing goes back in America, back to the colonial days. So it's really our first sport that we had that became on a national level. So you're talking decades before baseball came along, and this was the national sport. It kind of started in the South, a lot of plantations and farms down there, and spread up to the north through Long Island. And it was really informal for many years. It was, people on farms. I've got a fast horse. No, my horse is faster. So let's have a competition. And then, wagers started happening. And then it became sort of a bigger deal. Horses were imported through England mostly to get the bloodstock going. And then it became a very big sport. It just kind of evolved, throughout the time. And Saratoga came into the scene right in the 1860s, during the Civil War era. There had been kind of informal racing, as far back as the 1820s in Saratoga. The state fair came in 1847 to Saratoga, and they had their first kind of recognized racing there. They were mostly trotting races, though, harness, but there was one thoroughbred race there. But it really started going in Saratoga in 1863. That's when they had their first organized races. So it developed from there. Those first 4 days of racing in 1863 led to them building the track the following year, which is right across the street, and that is the current facility. So the history is pretty remarkable. Those Saratoga races took place only a few weeks after the Battle of Gettysburg. So you're having a little bit of perspective of the era. And then, it was so successful that they needed bigger grounds, they needed a grandstand, and that's how the track was built here. And it's still the oldest sports facility in the country.
Wow, really? I had no idea about that. Why Saratoga Springs specifically? Why not anywhere else in New York, I guess?
So it was already kind of a resort town. You had people that were already coming to Saratoga for the mineral baths and the spas and everything. And gambling was already something that had taken place there. And there was a proprietor named John Morrissey who grew up in Troy. He was an Irish immigrant, and he became famous as a bare-knuckle boxing champion. And he opened a couple casinos that were kind of the very big thing to do in the nightlife in Saratoga during this era. But he wanted something during the day that would kind of, balance that out. So he had a couple people he was talking to about, bringing thoroughbred racing to Saratoga. And it was kind of an illogical thing because during that time, the war was going on, and pretty much most of the horses in the country had been requisitioned for the war effort, both by the Union and the Confederacy. But he started placing ads in Southern journals in late 1862, early 1863 to see if there was interest in this. And the sportsmen down there were interested because they couldn't race their horses or make money down at that time because the country was just so war-ravaged, and some of the tracks that they had down in the South were even being used for military encampments. So Saratoga in the northern part had not been really touched by the fighting. So this opportunity arose, and it proved to be very successful.
Wow. Okay. So did some of the horses, I guess, that were involved in the war effort make it their way to horse racing as well, or were they kind of like separate? They
were kind of, they obviously, thoroughbreds are bred for racing, but, they were just looking for any sort of horse that could, help out in the war effort. So a lot of them were confiscated and brought in for those purposes. A lot of the horses that were stallions or top racing prospects in the South, they tried to hide them. They tried to ship them out of different areas. There was a great stallion named Lexington he's actually the logo of the city of Lexington.
Wow.
But he was a great racehorse, and by that time he was a remarkable stallion, and he was extremely valuable for the breeding stock. And they actually sent him to Illinois to hide him to get him out of the harm's way there.
Wow, that's really cool. It's like refugees almost,
yeah,
but horses.
in a lot of ways. Yeah.
And was it immediately popular when it came to Saratoga Springs? I mean, like you said, there was already gambling going on. What was kind of the immediate reaction early on?
It was extremely popular. It was well received. Like I said, there were 4 days of racing that first summer. They were just getting things organized. And there were 2 races per day. When I say 2 races, everybody's like, well, that doesn't really sound like a lot. But they were kind of a best of 3. You know, this wasn't like you just have the one race today and it's over. The competition was basically a best of 3 to determine the winner. So you had, multiple races going on each day. They drew 3,000 people to the first day at the track there, which during that time was a pretty significant number. And over the 4 days, it was estimated that they had 15,000 people. So they made all of their money back, and they made really good profit. And they had such interest in it that they said, we needed more land because the place that they had the races going on was the old trotting track that they used from 1847. And it was supposed to be a mile track. And after they measured it, they realized it was short. The turns were bad. They didn't have a grandstand there. So they saw the potential for it. They knew that they already had this crowd of people that were coming to Saratoga in the summertime. And this track was very popular. The first year, 1864, at the new track, it was a 4-day meet. They didn't have a lot of time and horses to do this, but it kept growing and growing through the 1860s and 1870s. Then more tracks were being built in New York, mostly down by the city. But Saratoga remained wildly popular, and it was a big hit right from the beginning.
Wow. And you mentioned profits. I mean, give us a little bit of an idea. How much money did it take to build the track? And when you say profits, how much money are we sort of talking?
It's hard to tell, looking back and all of this. Morrissey leased the grounds initially. The deeds are still in the Saratoga County Clerk's office if you want to go see them. But they got 125 acres for the grounds. And, it was really kind of a modest grandstand that they built at first. It's nothing like what you see today. That's kind of evolved over the decades. But the horse owners thought it was so lucrative. They were bringing horses from all over the place. That first meeting in 1863, they had 26 horses that came, which doesn't sound like a lot, but they came from all sorts of different places. They were from Kentucky, Virginia. A couple horses came from Canada. So they saw the opportunity there to have purse money that was put up through the admissions and everything like that. So it was profitable. I wouldn't want to speak that they were making tons and tons of money, right. but it evolved and developed, and it was within a few years recognized as the premier track in the country.
Right. Wow. That's so cool. And you talked a little bit about the grandstand, that it was a bit modest compared to today. I mean, give us a little bit of an idea about what the track did look like when it was first built and in those early years, and how it sort of evolved into the track that we know today.
Yeah. So, I mean, with a facility that's that old, over the years and decades, you have ebbs and flows and popularity and everything. Morrissey was the guy who was the visionary behind all of this, and the track was extremely popular until he died in 1878. And it was still good for a few more years after that, but they had some really poor management. And by the mid to late 1890s, Saratoga was kind of struggling, and they hadn't updated the facilities. Tracks in New York City and New Jersey and stuff were more modern, more up to date, and could bring bigger people in. And it was around that time that William Collins Whitney, who's the patriarch of the Whitney racing family, wanted to invest in Saratoga, and he put in a lot of money into the track, built a new grandstand, refurbished the grounds. They added an additional turf course at Saratoga as well to have grass racing. So he put a lot of investment into it, and that's kind of the modern facility you see today. Even though it was around 1900, that's the grandstand. That's where it came from, that era. And then throughout the decades, they've added more seats and a clubhouse, and now there's a separate clubhouse, the 1863 club, that is the one spot at the track that's air conditioned, which is obviously very important during the summertime. But it's evolved quite a bit, adding stabling area, improving the housing. So it's constantly evolving over there.
Right, absolutely. And despite that refurbishment, are there any sort of signs, like if I were to go to the track today, are there any signs that we could see of the original track?
So the original track is where they have the training area now. So it's called the Oklahoma Training Track, which is basically across the street on Union Avenue. So the horses train. They can train on the main track as well, but a lot of them train at the Oklahoma Training Track on the other side, and that's where a lot of the barn areas are. And there's an area that they call Horse Haven. There's a couple of markers, and it says 1863, and that's kind of the area over there where the original racing took place. So it's designated by a couple of markers, but there's no real physical remnants of that original track. It's a barn area, training grounds at this point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, personally, I don't go to the track very often, but I have a lot of friends that do. And I think there's sort of a conception where like the people that go to the track are more on the wealthy side, I would say, at least today. I don't know how true that is. I mean, could you provide any insight into like the dynamics today and then versus in the past?
Absolutely. So to own a racehorse is an expensive thing to do. You go to the sales in the summer, and you can see horses being sold for millions and millions of dollars each. Not just for a single horse could be sold for multi-million dollars, but they also have horses that sell much cheaper. And there's partnerships that people get involved in. So instead of one person buying a $3 million horse, you could get together with 20 or 30 people and kind of split costs and everything. But going to the track, it's a very interesting mix of people. You have everybody from your very wealthy billionaires and millionaire types to people who just want to go into the backyard and bet a couple of dollars on races, watch the fashion of the people who go by, dress up. It's people from all walks of life, which is kind of what the personnel are made up too. The jockeys and the trainers come from all different places. The grooms, the hot walkers, the people who work for Naira at the track. So it's really kind of a melting pot of all different types of people. So while it does have this reputation, and you think of Saratoga in the summer or the Kentucky Derby of being all about catering to the wealthy people, they're there, but so is just about everybody else too. So it's kind of an opportunity for anybody to go to the races. It's probably the cheapest thing you can go to as far as a sporting event. If you just want to go into the backyard, they let you bring your own food and beverages in here at Saratoga. So it can be pricey there, obviously, but you can bring your own stuff in. So it's it's a pretty unique opportunity. Yeah.
And you mentioned fashion. I mean, obviously that's a big thing today. I mean, you see the big hats, the really nice dresses that the women wear, just really like fun outfits. What was the history of the fashion of that like sort of fashion trend that we see today? Was that something that extended all the way back to when
looking at kind of like old pictures from the 19th century and early 20th century, you see the women very well dressed up in gowns at a lot of places, men wearing jackets and top hats and stuff like that. But I think it depends on the track and where you were. The Kentucky Derby has gotten into being this super high fashion type event. But you also, you watch it on TV and you'll see guys wearing crazy outfits and, just in the backyard of Saratoga, you can walk around, you see people in T-shirts and shorts and everything. So, again, it's kind of a mix of, what sort of vibe you're going for and where you're hanging out and everything. So
Right. Absolutely. That makes sense. And I think that'll bring us to our first break here at Upstate Archives. Thanks for sticking with us. Welcome back to Upstate Archives. I am joined today by Brian from the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. So I think, based on our conversation, a more like natural next question would be, it evolved into this big thing in Saratoga Springs. I mean, it was already big when it first came, but how did that sort of affect the economy and population of Saratoga Springs? It was already, like you said, a resort city. How did this sort of help that boom?
Yeah, I would think especially when you look at today, the impact of Saratoga Racecourse on the economy is in the tens of millions of dollars each summer. And that's been even bigger the last couple of years with having the Belmont Stakes here on a temporary basis. But typically there's been 40 days of racing each summer, and it's a major bonus to the hotels in town, the restaurants, all the shops, and it's not just Saratoga; it's regionally. It's Lake George, it's Clifton Park, it's people coming in for these events. It's the horse sales as well that come in every summer. So it's had a massive impact, and you look at the history of it, and it's kind of gone with the times as well too. You've had the Roaring '20s where things were big here with the even the Prohibition era. Everybody wanted to come in, and it was such a wild time. And then you had the Great Depression right after that. So the track kind of went up and down. Saratoga was actually closed during the World War II years because of travel restrictions in New York.
Wow.
So, and then like the town, Saratoga kind of had a decline in like the 1950s, and then after that, another renaissance. So. Probably around the 1980s is when things really started booming for the track as far as it was so popular they expanded their dates. It was a 24-day summer for a while, but then it went up to 28 and then 32 and then 36 and now 40. This year with the Belmont Festival and starting the season on July 4th, there's going to be a record 51 days of racing in Saratoga this year. So the popularity is just, it's at a peak. They get over 1 million people at the track during the summer every year.
Absolutely. And do you know sort of like the statistics of like how much money does it bring in each year or so?
The Chamber of Commerce and Discover Saratoga put out some numbers each year, but I might be off on this, but I want to say it's something like $250 million.
Jeez.
I mean, for the economic impact, and I don't know what goes into all those studies. I mean, obviously impacting. They look at occupancy rates of the hotels and restaurants and everything like that, and they analyze the data. But it's a hugely impressive thing for our economy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just curious, I mean, how have the rules changed, I guess, of horse racing? Have they changed much in its history? How have like the treatment, I guess, of the horses or just general sort of the setup of the races?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in a modern era now with a lot of technology and looking at stuff. For such a long time, racing was pretty much anything goes, but now it's like all of the safety is the biggest thing for the jockeys, for the trainers, for the horses, looking at all the medication issues and everything around the sport. Right. There's now a national agency called HISA that oversees everything to make sure the sport's as safe as possible. Rules have changed throughout the times. They don't race the horses as demanding as they used to. In the early days of Saratoga, it would not be uncommon to see races of 2.5, 3.5 miles. Now you rarely would see anything over 1.25 miles. They space out the races differently. Horses used to run sometimes 5-6 times in a month. Now if they race once a month, so there's much more of an eye on the training and making sure that the animals are well taken care of. So that's kind of the biggest thing as far as the involvement of the sport. The surfaces are much better now than they used to be and everything. So overall, the sport's in a really good shape.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking of the horses, I think when you look at the horse racing sport, you see these big sort of coaching families and these sort of big names in horse racing. Can you tell us a little bit about the big names that have come through Saratoga Springs?
Yeah, absolutely. When you look at Saratoga, especially the racetrack here and everything that's going on, the first family that kind of comes to mind is the Whitney family. And that's because it's a family that has gone back to the turn of the 20th century. William Collins Whitney, his son, Harry Payne Whitney, and then his son, Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, they were all deeply involved in the track and in racing and in Saratoga Springs, helping the city, helping the racetrack. And then C.V. Whitney, his widow was Mary Lou Whitney, who continued that legacy onward. So from the late 1800s through the early 21st century, that was a family that for 120 plus years was, very prominent. They bred great horses. They won major races at the track. They were very philanthropic. C.V. Whitney was the first president of the National Museum of Racing, one of the founders. So you've got other families that have been very much involved. The Phipps family that's been involved in jockey club affairs. You see it on the track too. Steve Asmussen's a trainer. Both of his kids now are jockeys. The Davis family, Robbie Davis was a jockey. He's got 3 children now that are riders. You see it with kind of like it's a multi-generational thing in a lot of stuff like that. So. The racetrack draws people in, and they kind of stay with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know we have speaking of the Whitney family, we have the Whitney Stakes. When was that first established, like that race?
Yeah, so that goes back to 1928.
Okay.
It's one of the more prominent races in the country. So next year in 27 will be the 100th running of that race.
Wow.
It's one of the more prestigious races at Saratoga. But it's not even close to being one of the oldest ones, which is pretty interesting. The Travers Stakes was the first race that was run on opening day of 1864. It's the oldest 3-year-old race in the country. So it's older than the Kentucky Derby or the Preakness or the Belmont. It's been won by 29 horses now that are in the Hall of Fame. So the Alabama is another stakes race that goes back. Some of the 2-year-old races, the Hopeful, the Saratoga Special, the Sanford, those are races that go back for more than a century. So it's a place that's steeped in tradition, and some of those races are some of the more coveted ones in the sport to win.
Absolutely. And speaking of winning horses, I see you brought some trophies here with you today. Do you want to sort of explain what we have here?
Sure. So this one I've got right here is a Saratoga Special Trophy from 1914 that was won by the filly Regret, who is in the Hall of Fame. And kind of what's interesting about this is, as a 2-year-old in 1914, when she won these races, she was competing against all males, and that's what she did for those 3 races at Saratoga. She beat the 3 males. She beat males in those 3 races, and the following spring, she went on to become the first filly to win the Kentucky Derby. So it's a rare accomplishment because only 2 others have done that since then. So this is one of the treasures of the museum collection here. Regret's 1914 Saratoga Special Trophy. And this trophy over here is a Travers Trophy. We have several of them in the museum collection. This is from 1938, and it was won by a horse named Thanksgiving, which has a pretty interesting story in a couple of aspects. One, the horse was trained by a woman named Mary Hirsch. It was the first time that a woman had won the Travers Stakes. She was the first licensed female trainer in the country. And 1938 went all the way. It was only a couple years ago that the second female trainer won the Travers Stakes when Jenna Antonucci won it with Arcangelo. So you're talking, an 80-some-odd year difference. And those are the only 2 women that have won the Travers in the race's history. And the horse itself had kind of a neat story. So Thanksgiving, which is obviously a cool name for a horse to win. The previous summer at Saratoga, he was lucky to even be alive because his horse was struck by lightning.
What?
Yeah, and he survived and came back and won stakes races, including the Travers. So a couple of real interesting trophies that tell a little bit about the history of the sport.
So that horse was struck by lightning and then went on to run races and win?
Yeah.
That's that's really impressive.
Yeah, so Mary Hirsch was the trainer, and like I said, she was the first woman licensed by the Jockey Club to train. She was the daughter of a Hall of Fame trainer named Max Hirsch, and a lot of people were even credited Max Hirsch as the trainer, didn't even realize who she was at that point. So, but it later became recognized, what a great accomplishment it was for her. So a couple of the treasures here from the museum collection.
Right, absolutely. Can you lift up that second trophy so that we could see it in the camera? Oh, that's so beautiful. What are these made of?
So these are gold.
Really?
These are gold trophies. Yep. The original one, the New York Racing Association, just brings out on Travers Day. It's kind of one of those things that just comes out ceremonial. The owners get the replica trophies of these, which are obviously very prestigious as well. The Travers Trophy is called the Man o' War Cup because it was named after Man o' War, one of the most famous horses in Saratoga. He won the Travers in 1920 in a speed record time that stood for 42 years. Man o' War was raced 7 times at Saratoga, won 6 of them. His only loss at Saratoga was in the Sanford by a horse named Upstate. So, it kind of adds to the lore, and the mystique of Saratoga. He was considered by many people to be the greatest horse of all time.
Absolutely. Well, those are beautiful. Thank you so much for bringing those in today. And I think this will bring us to a good time for our last break. We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking with us here at Upstate Archives. I wanted to close out this episode. I mean, as we said in the beginning of the show, you are from the National Museum of Racing and Hall of Fame in Saratoga Springs. Just tell us a little bit about what the museum offers, what guests can go see when they go visit.
So the museum is the centerpiece of thoroughbred racing, in my opinion. We're the National Hall of Fame, and that's we're the Cooperstown of horse racing. Our Hall of Fame is one of the great attractions. It's an entirely digital space where you can walk in and learn about all the different legends of the sport through touchscreen interactive. If you like interactives, our museum is cutting edge. If you want to learn about Secretariat or Seabiscuit, you just go touch the screen. You can play race replays. You can see images of them. You can learn all about their connections. We have a signature 16-minute film called What It Takes Journey to the Hall of Fame, which is a 360-degree surround sound experience.
Wow.
Just about what it takes to reach that highest level of achievement, and it's stunning. Anybody who comes in and watches it, if you don't know what the sport or you're just kind of learning about it, you'll be a fan after you watch this. So it's a great experience. But overall, we have an incredible collection of equine art, probably one of the finest in the world. We have, as you saw, these are some of the trophies from the collection. But along with that, we're doing programming all the time, whether it's educational events or outreach. We do tours of the training track in the morning. We have exhibits that are changing all the time about all different aspects of the sport, whether it's about certain horses or certain eras or racetracks, showcasing different artists and photographers. So we're open year round. We have major events around that. We have a big Kentucky Derby party every year. We do events for the Triple Crown races with the Preakness. Obviously, having the Belmont in town is, it's a week full of activities for us. We do things around the Breeders' Cup. All throughout Saratoga season, we have handicapping seminars. People just want to learn about the sport. We have activities for children. So there's always something going on. Year round. We're a little quieter in the off season, of course, but we do have events and activities all year round.
Absolutely. When was the museum first established?
So we were established in 1950. Our first we celebrated our 75th anniversary in 2025. Our first location was actually in the Canfield Casino while we were kind of looking for a permanent home. But the museum, where it's located at 191 Union Avenue, that opened in 1955. And it's kind of expanded a few times since then and evolved into the space we have today.
Absolutely. Well, I've visited it a few years ago, and it's just really beautiful. I want to go back soon. It's just, beautiful building. Everything is just so – I learned a lot when I was there.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for joining me this week. I really appreciated it, and I'm sure we'll have you back at some point. I mean, there's just so much to dive into with horse racing here, so
Anytime.
Hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. And thank you all for joining us here on this episode of Upstate Archives. We'll see you next week.